We're going to continue to talk to you about Bible prophecy. And since our Bible reading for today for Journey Church that we're doing as a congregation, we read a chapter a day, is Matthew 24. And so I had planned on talking to you about the rapture, which we introduced last week, the signs of the times. The next great event that's going to happen is the rapture of the church for us to be looking forward to. And so I was going to talk about the rapture, and yet it just was too perfect that today was Matthew 24, a major prophetic chapter in the Bible, in the New Testament. It's a parallel of Luke chapter 21, and so you can read both of those, and you'll get a little bit, they're the same thing, but whenever you have two people that are a witness and doing something, they'll give the detail. He had a ball cap, he had a ball cap. It was a red ball cap with a Cardinal logo on it. He had, tennis shoes on, and the other one will be like, he had tennis shoes, and he had these purple socks of all things. Different ones might have a little bit more information, different details that point out, I didn't see that. I was listening to this. I was focused on that. And so you can read both, Luke 21, Matthew 24, and you're hearing the same information and put them together. But for tonight, let's start with Matthew 24, and for the opening, I'm just going to read right through the passage as an opening text, the whole chapter. And then we'll go down and we'll break it down as we go through it. Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? And assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left upon another, that they shall not be thrown down." And I mentioned this to you last week. And so, and I talked about how large some of the foundation stones were, massive. And he said, when they were in awe of it, look at these, look at this temple and everything, and they were outside the walls and just in awe. And Jesus said, "I tell you that not one of these stones will be left upon another." And so he was prophesying. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, so he mentions that, and then they move on past the temple, and they go to the Mount of Olives, and he's seated there. His disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" When are these things going to be? Jesus talked about the destruction of Herod's temple. When is that going to happen? Then they said, "What will be the sign of your coming?" Well, that's a different thing. And the end of the age. When is the end of everything? 3 questions. And Jesus is going to deal with those, and so there's a bouncing around. He's going to reference, stick a parenthetical in there, and and when you understand this, it'll help you a lot. Again, we'll break it down a little bit, just bring out certain points. Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you." This is important. "For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many, and you will hear of wars." And let me just say this as I read. I know this is our text, but I got some notes that I'll bring out. We've had these people from the time of the New Testament all the way till now, people saying, "I'm the Christ." I'm Jesus come back. David Koresh, different cult leaders are saying, "I'm the second coming of the Lord," and I'm Jesus come back and everything. But it looks forward, but there's a distinct time frame that Jesus is going to get into. So he says, "Be careful that no one deceives you. For many's going to come in my name, saying, 'I'm the Christ,' and they will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, plagues," that's epidemics or pandemics and that sort of thing, "earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake, and then many will be offended and will betray one another and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Boy, lawlessness abounding. And then Luke 21, when you read the parallel of some of that's very fascinating. But he who endures to the end shall be saved, and the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations. Then the end will come. Therefore, so he's sharing some things, and then he gets in here. He says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. And let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babes in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days are shortened, no flesh should be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. I'm just going to mention to you again, he's covering things. And he's repeating some of these kind of things that are happening, and it's real interesting. I'm getting notified that we don't have sound. So I can't answer that. So anyway, there's going to be this tribulation, again, the false Christ and all that. It says, verse 24, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders, deceive if possible the elect. So I've told you beforehand. I'm warning you. So there's going to be these things going throughout the ages, but specifically during the end times even more. And pay attention to elect. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is here in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from the end of heaven to the other. Now learn this parable. Now he's jumped to the third question there, the end of the age. Just so you know, he's hit what's happening. You know that the temple is going to be destroyed. Not one stone's laid on another. This is all going to happen, and there's going to be stuff happening, and do this. He gets into the tribulation period, what's going to be happening during that. Speaking of the second coming, and that's going to begin the day of the Lord. And now he gets into a parable, and he's going to go. He's going forward, but backing up from the tribulation and all that, and he's backing up to a sign, another sign. So he talks about signs that kind of indicate, and it's preparing, but then there's specific things that are going to happen during the tribulation. And he goes back, and he's going to go back to this sign in verse 32. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches are already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. When you look at a fig tree and it puts forth leaves, you know, you can tell summer is near. But we know sometimes summer starts, you know, when they say summer starts, sometimes it's a little late, sometimes it's a little early. You know, we all know that. Seasons, sometimes it's like we don't, but we'll say, we just like missed fall. Or summer started early. You know, we went from winter to summer, or not fall. We missed spring. We went from winter to summer, and it's because it just stayed cold long, and then the heat kicks in. We understand that. So when you see a fig tree putting leaves out, you have a sense of when summer's going to be, but you don't know for sure when summer's going to be. You can't look at a fig tree and say, okay, 29 days. At 9 in the morning, you know, summer starts. It's an indicator. We see certain things on plant life, vegetation, and it's an awareness that spring is about to happen, summer is about to happen, and so on. And that's what Jesus is saying when he's talking about this. It's just giving you an indicator that you're looking at the soon approaching time for a season. In this case, summer. There's a season coming. When you see this, know that that season's coming on the horizon. And so verse 33, so also when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. He says, see all these things. So he's backdating, I know I'm jumping in to this reading, but we'll get into this in detail, but he's backdating that there's these other signs, but he goes back and says all these things. So he's just kind of putting together various things. And it's good to know the context of this stuff so that it gives you a grasp of how things work. So he says, so it's near, it's at the doors. We've been saying, you know, the end time started in the New Testament. That was the beginning. These are the beginning of the last days. That's the way they live their life. That's the way they preach their messages. That's the way we should be living ours. So he says, assuredly I say to you that this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. All these things. So all this stuff's going to be going on, and that generation that starts to really see this stuff kicking in, none of that's not going to pass away. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know the hour for the hour your Lord is coming. But know this, that the master of the house, if the master of the house had known the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. And that was what we talked about last week, the blessed hope from Titus, that teaching these things and that the rapture is going to happen at any time. This is second coming stuff. It's talking some tribulation stuff, end time things, but it's backdating to, just to give you a jump ahead, the fig tree is Israel. You know, scholars say that when Israel became a nation, it's a type in the Bible that Israel is the fig tree. And so when you see the leaves on there, know that summer's coming. Israel came and was restored as a nation. And that generation that saw that, we saw that. There are people that are living that saw this generation. That happened in 1948. And so it happened. So he backs up and he's talking about that, and it's coming forth. So we're living in the last of the last days, because all these signs that are, some of them are pointers, and then some of them are going to happen during the tribulation. Sun, darken, the moon darken, and all this stuff. That's not happening. That's not happening in our life. The rapture will occur. That's part of the tribulation, and we'll get into that next week. Where did I leave off here? You don't know when it's come. So who is a faithful and wise servant whom his master made ruler over the household to give them food in due season? Blessed is the servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, at an hour when he is not aware of, and will cut him up in two and appoint his portion with the hypocrites, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now there's different details in Luke 24. I was going to read that, but we lost so much time in the beginning. I was just going to read and let you see some of the differences and additions. But let's just go back through and go to verse number 1, and I'm just going to give you some notes that I wanted to bring out for tonight, and we'll call it good and try to make the best out of creating a sermon out of this. But let's see. Okay. First of all, this text that we're reading is, as we saw, a private teaching to the disciples when Jesus had retreated to the Mount of Olives, and they came up and said, you were talking about this at the temple. When are these things going to be? And they had asked him these questions. Jesus points this out, but they go to him and ask, and so he responded to those three things: the destruction of the temple, the second coming, and the end of the age, the end of all things, And so now these topics in Matthew 24, they're interwoven. And because he's asking several things. When's this temple going to be destroyed? Well, that's different. I'll tell you, I mentioned it last week. The temple of Herod, the temple that they were looking at, that Jesus said not one stone will be left standing on the other, that happened in 70 A.D. when Titus, the Roman, went in and he ransacked, Jerusalem, just tore it apart, conquered it, and the glory of Jerusalem, the glory of Israel, has always been its temple. That's why Nehemiah wept that there was no temple. He was weeping for that because Solomon's temple had been destroyed. And so they rebuilt it, and God used Nehemiah to lead a group of people to build that. And he gave favor with the heathen king that was the ruler of the world at the time, and got favor to go back to Israel because he was the cupbearer in the king's court, and he went back and he oversaw the rebuilding of the temple, and so that was important. And here we have this temple that Herod, it was Herod's temple. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world, and Jesus says it's going to be torn down, and that happened in the A.D. 70. And so it ranges the ages because of the questions, and so it's interweaving them. Now the difficulty is partially resolved when you realize that most Bible prophecy, let me say it like this, is capable of near fulfillment and far fulfillment. There are things that are types, and I mentioned this last week, that can have a dual interpretation, a dual meaning, a near meaning and a far meaning. And we see that in here. And when you understand, that's helpful, because he's talking about a temple, and they just conflate it, think it in their mind. But this temple that they're looking at is going to be destroyed. It happens in 70 A.D. But then as he goes forward in Matthew 24, he talks about when you see the abomination of desolation come in the temple. Well, there was a near meaning when Titus goes in and defames it, like Antiochus Epiphanes did in the Old Testament temple. He went in and polluted the temple, and it was an abomination of desolation, and God judged it. And so you have that happen, but the scriptures that are talking about the abomination of desolation, that's going to be in the future temple. That's going to be the Antichrist coming in and setting up and saying, "Worship me, I'm the Lord, I'm God." And so you can see a near meaning and a far meaning. Okay, and does that help you to make sense of some of this? Because these questions they ask stretched across thousands of years, and Jesus is dealing with them, and so very important. Now, Jesus uses the tragic events surrounding the destruction of the temple that's going to happen in just a few decades from the time that they're hearing this in A.D. 70, as a picture or as a type of what the conditions are going to be like in the end times, which is the times we're living in. So the condition of the world, the Roman Empire became more and more corrupt and polluted, and sin was rampant. They were eating, they were drinking, and being merry. Everything's good. Look at our temple. It's everything. And then all of a sudden, it's destroyed. Jerusalem's destroyed, and Israel is scattered amongst the nations. And Jesus is referring to that, and he's linking that and letting you see that the last time, because what they further asked was future events, further future events, when he's coming back in the end of the age. That's different than when that temple they were looking at was going to be destroyed. So he says it's going to be similar. And here we live in a time like that. And then he links it as also another description, those times, but also that preceded the destruction of the temple, because they had an opportunity, and by and large, many of them rejected the preaching of the gospel that Jesus is the Christ. And they kept rejecting it, and then judgment came. They rather live a worldly life. They're rejecting the good news. And so they're scattered, and the gospel predominantly goes forth to the Gentiles. It still goes to the Jew first. Any Jew can be saved. The Gentile can be saved. The nation. The people of God. And that's important to know. Now, so he's connecting the events surrounding what was going to happen in AD 70 as a picture of the conditions preceding his own return. And when we think about that, when we're reading these verses, it helps us. And it's real interesting because the people who read that, who were in Jerusalem at the time that Titus went in there and ransacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple and all of that, they saw this army coming in and Titus coming in there, and they fled to mountains. Now this is something that's going to happen in the future. At the Battle of Armageddon, there's going to be an army coming, Antichrist is going to be in there, and Jesus is going to come back, and he says, when you start seeing all this, get out of Dodge. Go flee and hide. And they're going to flee when they see the Antichrist come in at 3.5 years into the tribulation and go into that temple. You know, he may be instrumental in causing that temple to be built. It might be part of what brings peace, a 7-year peace treaty between the Jews and the Arabs. Something everybody's been trying. Every president you and I have known in our lifetimes since 1948 has tried to bring peace between the Arabs and the Jews. They've been battling. The Arab people fought it and resisted it. Other nations fought it and resisted it, but God made it happen because he prophesied it would happen. And it just seemed like there was no way it was going to happen, but then all of a sudden at the last minute it happened, and the vote in the UN passed it, and Israel became a nation, and land was designated. Land that God had already given them. He promised and said it was yours forever. But they'd been scattered. So they come back in the land that God provided, but there was resistance. And then there was fighting immediately. And they had to battle, just like they had to when they took that land in the first place, when they crossed the Jordan. So there was conflict. 1967, a 6-day war where 4 Arab nations led by Egypt went to destroy Israel, outnumbered, just supernaturally defeated all of those when they were tiny and weaker, and yet they won, and they won in 6 days. It was the power of God that enabled that to happen, and that's going to happen again. So we see these parallels and these types and things that are going to happen, and events that occurred are going to happen again. So Israel's a nation, and there'll be an army that comes in, and Antichrist that'll come. But because they had heard that, it helped them during the time when Titus came. Now, some people, most Christians are not going to say this, but some people say, well, there is no tribulation. We've lived the tribulation. That when that happened in 70 A.D., that was the fulfillment of all these things. So this all occurred in its history, and there's no Jesus coming back and all this stuff. It says he's coming back. They asked when you're coming back. He said, I'm coming back. He said, that's going to happen, but then this is going to happen. And these are going to happen before you see the Son of Man come. And he's coming. And people who say it happened and so it's not going to occur, you're not reading it. And if you and you can't read that text besides the fact that he says I'm coming back more than once, and this is all going on. It also has some signs that, yes, there's always been wars, been rumors of wars, then been earthquakes in various places, there's been famines, pestilences, lawlessness, and sin, all these things. But sun hasn't been dark, the moon hasn't been turned out, the stars aren't put out. You cannot say that's all occurred. It hasn't. And I can tell you, they felt like it happened in 70 A.D. They felt like it was the end of the world. Wouldn't you not? Think about Howard, our oldest member of our church. He fought in World War II. The people, if Howard's generation believed, they called World War I the war to end all wars. There's never been a war like this. There'll never be another war. And just years later, World War II happened. And it just diminished World War I. And the people that were living in the time of World War I, and especially time of World War II, and what was going on to the Jews, all of the stuff that was happening, they thought they were living in the last days. But he said these signs are going to continue to happen. These things are going to go on and on. But then it's going to get near. And there's an increase in it. And have we not seen an increase in the number of earthquakes and natural disasters, the frequency of wars, and the rumors of wars, and famines and pestilence? But every generation feels this way. So I can't tell you Jesus is coming tomorrow. That's part of the text tonight. No one knows when the end events are going to happen. In what was it, 1918, you had the Spanish flu? I think it was 1918, wasn't it? That killed way more, from what I remember reading and hearing of it, than what we're going through now. We've had swine flu, we've had, the different Asian flus and all. We've got the COVID-19 now. Throughout generations, we've had things. So we can look and say there's all kinds of wars. We've had earthquakes. We've had lawlessness. We've had, sin running rampant. It's sure people living like the days of Noah. That's one thing I can tell you. More than ever, Chris started to watch the first episode of the new Muppet show. They've started it again on the Disney Plus channel, and there's 2 episodes so far. First episode of the kickoff of the Muppet show again. They had this character in a flamboyant dress, and he was like this decorator and everything with Miss Piggy doing their thing. And then they had another character that was, it's all decorating and cooking and doing style. It's style, Miss Piggy Styles or something. And, and they're going on with this episode. And then RuPaul is the guest, the first guest on the first thing. And it's the normalization of being effeminate, being transgender, being homosexual. And there was a character that set up and says, I'm going to go design now. And so it's like 3 characters, all of this, just the normalization. We're living in the days like it was in preceding the flood in Noah's time. Because the rampant sin, not just that sin, but that was one of the key signs of that time, and it's just absolutely like that again. It is not only normalized as being normal, and people are born this way and everything else, but it's promoted. It's being pushed. They're lowering it down to accept it now into kindergarten. It's going into curriculum to kindergartners that this is normal, so that boys can be in different names and wear different clothes and all the different things. It's being embraced. It's being pushed, and so it's actually popular. And I tell you, there's some television shows on television. And, I enjoy. We watch America's Got Talent. It's a enjoyable show, but there's certain acts that we just skip forward. And but have you noticed that when certain things, not just one thing, but but when anyone comes in there and they're flamboyant and they're homosexual and and all of that, they just get beloved praise by the judges, and they go forward, don't they? Some of them, it's like that guy last year. He was just with the hat and the thing, and he was just Simon, darling, and everything. And Simon's like, yes, darling. And and he went forward, and he got it all the way toward the end. He wasn't that talented. There have been individuals on there who have said, well, I came out, it's hard in my life. When they do that, they do it on purpose. I'm not saying it's not a thing that's bad. Bullying is bad. But if you watch that show now, many of them say, I was bullied, because they get the favor of the judges. They create it as their storyline. I'm not saying they're making up stories, but it's funny how many of them bring that out. Well, many people are bullied, and it's horrible. And we should denounce that and change that. But what I'm saying is they learn that, and so people are going on there, and it's celebrated, it's embraced. It's not just like you do your thing, I'll do my thing. It's now celebrated. And I've seen people who have less talent than others. Again, you might have an individual who will make that part of their storyline. Well, I came out, and my family rejected me, and it's been hard. And they have less talent, but they'll go forward because the story than somebody else who has more talent. And it's because of the signs of the times. It's like in the days of Noah. That's the way it was. It was like that. It was like that during the fall of Rome. They embraced these kind of sins. Not just homosexual. I'm just giving that because it is one of the key signs. And we see an embracing of all sexual immorality. It is so normal now. It used to be a shame to live outside of wedlock. People would be called names. The term of living with someone outside of wedlock, it'd say they're shacking up. They're living in sin. All this stuff. Now, it's just common. And it touches every family. It's touched my family, touches your family. We all know people because it's normal now not to get married. People live together, have babies together, and get married years later now. If they ever do. That's the times we're living in. And so you see this, it's always been this way, but you see this ramping up, this increase. And it was that way before Noah. There were only, Noah, a righteous man, and his family got to be saved. It doesn't say his sons were righteous. His family was covered. There was a righteous man. There was a righteous man, Lot, at one time. His wife, we know, wasn't. His daughters weren't. They just didn't turn back. Their husbands didn't go with them. Daughters went out. If they had husbands, the daughters went out. If they had husbands, they stayed. Noah's wife, she turned back, longing for that city and that lifestyle. She turned into salt. Only Lot. Abraham did that. And so this passage is talking about these indicators. So very quickly, nothing about tonight's been very quickly. So we can say this: there will be lawless deception, social and political upheaval, natural calamities and plagues, lawlessness, persecution, and all of these are precursors of the end time, and we're living in that day. There are churches in our country that are being persecuted. There are pastors who are under the threat of arrest and jail right now, especially in the state of California. They're defying the order when they're saying you can open casinos, you can open nightclubs, you can open Walmart, you can open all of this stuff, but you can't have church. And if you do have church, we'll let you have church, but you can't have more than 10 people, or you can't have more than this small amount. And if you do have that small amount you do have, they're not allowed to sing. And it's against our Constitution to say how a church celebrates its worship, how it interacts. We want to find a reasonable balance and understanding to things, and the pastors of California did the same. But it's went so over the top and gotten so crazy and so far gone that now they're in civil disobedience. And they're holding their services, and some of them are being told, your utilities are going to be turned off. We're confiscating your property, your land and your property, and we're going to arrest your pastor, any leadership, we're going to arrest especially the pastor, and put them in jail. And the threat and the thing that they're passing says it's going to be for a period of time. We're living in times like this, persecution. It's up. We haven't had that kind of thing in the United States. We've had it in other parts of the world, but it's happening, and so this event, which links some signs together, is bringing the persecution with that. The stage is being set for an Antichrist to be revealed, to become the abomination of desolation. And I read the whole passage, so I'm not getting to go verse by verse in great detail, but let me just go forward, because some of this in the first part of the verses references the destroying of the temple and dual references to the future, and then as it moves forward, it jumps into all of this. But when you go down in verse 8, it says, all these things are the beginning of sorrows. All these signs that I've been talking about, they're the beginning of sorrows. It's like a woman, she'll have the beginning. You don't know what, they give you a date. It's called the due date. The old saying is, they're coming 2 weeks early or 2 weeks late. Well, we went past 2 weeks early. We went past due date with our first baby. Lisa is ready when we come up on 2 weeks late. And and then Michelle came soon after. It's just an indicator. There's false labor. It's like, I know I'm getting close, and I'm thinking they go to the hospital, they get in there, say, yeah, that was some minor contractions, but it's just false labor. It's settled down. Go on home. And it may be another week. It's getting closer. It's getting stronger. There's things happening. You get a sense of it. The baby starts to drop. It doesn't mean baby's coming tomorrow. Lisa felt like the baby's dropped. It should be coming out. What's going on? I caught her trying to run a buffer, trying to do some physical stuff. Maybe if I vibrate and move, it's going to cause this baby to shake. Get your hands off that buffer, woman. It's an indicator. So there's 8 things that he talks about, 8 signs that are the beginning but not the end of sorrows. And verse 9, they'll deliver you up to be afflicted and kill you. This is going to be during the birth pains of Israel when it was born as a nation, and it happened. There was a near type. They had persecution. People were delivering up. They were being killed during the first centuries of the church. The Colosseum, different things. But this is speaking prophetically forward. So it had some near type similarity, but it's talking about Israel becoming a nation. They'll deliver you up to be afflicted. They'll kill you. You'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. The Jews are hated by the Gentiles. We're getting that stronger and stronger, but man, during the tribulation, it's going to be something. The gospel of the kingdom, the glad tidings in verse 14, is going to go forth in various types. It's used, good news, and the kingdom of heaven is referenced here, and nations, that all nations, it went forth at that time, and I can give you 2 scriptures where Paul says the Gospels went to all nations, all people, and it was a reference to at that time it went into all the world. But I'm going to tell you, and I just have to wrap it up. We've got a summary of this chapter. We can see the second coming. That's what I should close with, is just showing you, if I can, just a couple things. But the rapture is going to come. This is pointing to some things, but it's nothing like what's going to be during the tribulation. The tribulation, especially the second half, is going to be, as Jesus said in his own words, it's such great tribulation like the world has never seen up to the point Jesus talking about. They had some calamities. But what we're about to go through, what I'm talking about that's going to happen is like the world's never seen, nor ever will see. So everything that had happened, everything that those people had ever seen in their own life and ever will be, nothing like this tribulation period. That second 3.5 years is called the Great Tribulation. It's going to be horrible. And in verse 15, it talks about, wherefore when you see the abomination desolation, spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, that marks the middle of the tribulation. That's when the Great Tribulation, like the world has never seen, kicks in. It's not been fun. There's been battle and the Antichrist is going and he's defeating, he defeats 3 countries, of the revised Roman Empire, the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's image I talked about last week. For those of you that have, you can pop up that colored graphic. It doesn't show it on this graphic, but just to let you see this super detailed chart, I went ahead and ordered a big long banner of this chart. And this is just zoomed in on the tribulation period. But you see the underworld, you see what's happening in the world, the earth, and you see what's happening in heaven. That's just the 7-year tribulation period. This is God's plan from eternity past, which I differ with Finus Dacon in what he thinks of something, but that's okay. The bulk of all this is good. And it goes all the way to eternity future. And I think it's like 8 foot long. So we'll put that up, and you'll be able to see, and I'll be able to point it out. And if you want, I ordered some that are like 3 or 4 foot long, and if you want to buy one of them, at cost, you can get your own version of it. So I've got those on the way. They'll be here in the next few days. And so just to let you know. So that zoomed in thing comes from him. But we see the abomination referring to the Antichrist, his image in the Jewish temple. And that's when they say, in Judea flee and go forth. And that's going to set the stage for Armageddon. And it talks about the days being shortened and do that. But what I started to say, and help me if you can see it, because all my notes are mixed up here and combobulated. But where did it say the lightning? That he comes and there's the lightning flashes, and verse number 20. Let's start with 26. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he's in the desert, do not go out. Look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For, listen, as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Lightning is an image that you see. It comes from here, it goes across the sky, and it's visible. The rapture, Jesus is going to appear in the clouds, and he comes in the cloud of glory and on horses, but at the second coming. But he's going to appear in the sky, and we're going to be raptured. We may or may not be seen. The Scripture doesn't really speak to that. But the second coming, he's going to come out of the sky, and like lightning that comes out of the east, goes across, and we've seen it hits the water, it hits trees, it hits, and you see that come down. Have you ever had lightning? You thought, man, that had to be right next to me. The boom was so loud of the thunder. The lightning clap was so loud. The sky. I have felt the vibration of lightning and thunder coming down a couple times in my life. Like, I just, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was in a nuclear bomb one time in Korea. I woke up in the middle of the night, looked, and the whole out my window, it just turned bright white. Just bright white. A lightning bolt had come, the crash occurred, and it was just so, I thought the bomb went up. I was a nuclear biological chemical NCO. I studied all this. And then I see boom, boom, and this light, and I thought, okay, I'm about to vaporize. And, it was just lightning. And so as that happens, but that scene as it comes down, Jesus is coming down. He's going to set foot on the Mount of Olives. That mountain is going to split in two, and the armies that have surrounded Jerusalem to just destroy the Jews, because it says you'll be persecuted, you'll be hated. They're going to have such a hatred that the Antichrist has taken the 10 toes. He's going to conquer 3 kingdoms. 7 other kings are just going to give their sovereignty away. And he'll have the revised Roman Empire. Then the armies he creates from all of those nations, he goes up, conquers north. They speculate Russia. He's going to go off to the east, whatever that is, whether it's India, all the way to China, Japan, whatever. But he's going off to the east, and then he's going to come back with armies from everything, and he's going to surround and destroy Israel. And when that's all happening, the Jews have taken the warning. They fled. The ones that knew. And they go out. And they're in Petra. And he's going to come down, split that. And all those armies are going to be there. And the blood is going to be like the height of horses' bridles. He's going to wipe out all those armies. Massive casualties. Israel will not be destroyed. And then he'll set up his kingdom, build a temple. And he's going to sit, the only rightful one, in that temple to be worshipped. David's throne, he'll sit on it in the temple. These things are coming. But that's speaking of something where he says the coming will be. When we look at next week, the rapture, these are events happening, tribulation events happening, and then the coming of the Son of Man, that's the second coming. And it refers to the day of the Lord. I got to wrap this up. A day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. It's interesting that there's been 6 days, 6,000 years. There was a break, there's a break. But the day of the Lord, the next thing that's coming, when it says the day of the Lord, that's the second coming. That's the beginning of the day. But the millennial reign is the day of the Lord, because a day is 1,000 years. That's the Sabbath rest. That's where Jesus is going to sit, and no more wars. Everything's going to be stable for 1,000 years, like a Sabbath, where you just worship the Lord, worship Jesus, for that 1,000 years. No wars happening, all, and then the end of that will be the conclusion, and that's the last day. That's the end of the age, and that's going to be a new heaven and new earth. That's when everything is going to be cleaned up, purged with fire, and start new. So see how he's referencing the ages? But we think, that it's talking about the coming, and it's going to be like lightning, and we think rapture and all. It's second coming. Anyway, just thought it was relevant, interesting, because today we read that. And we may try to, just give you some notes on this, and you can just read it yourself. Father, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your word, which challenges us. Thank you for the Holy Spirit to help us understand. And may this be a motivation to live a life that's in readiness for your soon return. That we will not be slack. We will not be like the ones in here that just start eating and drinking and partying and just doing our own thing. Because, Lord, that's talking about second coming. How much more can we not know when the rapture is going to occur? We just thank you that it'll keep us holy, keep us ready. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you. Sorry about going over.